Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining the technology session. I'm so excited to have a room full of people. I believe a lot of people wanted to get a dose of optimism after the first session. um, and in this session, I would like to divide the session in probably three parts. First part is looking back in the past 2.5 years and how the COVID-19 affected the way people start their business and also manage and grow their business. And second part is the outlook for the future. So what's going to be the entrepreneurship post COVID-19 world? And probably the third part is the Q&A. I want to get ample time, probably 15 minutes or more for Q&A for both offline and online participants. So without further ado, I would like to ask each panelist about a brief introduction about about yourself and your business. Maybe each 1 minute or less. And I'll ask Rie to kickstart.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. My name is Rie Yamamoto, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Event Hub. We are a startup based here in Tokyo, and we are in the business of providing an event marketing platform for corporations that conduct webinars and conferences, mostly online and hybrid. It's a pleasure to be here today. Thanks.
Thanks, Rie. We probably should have used your system for this conference too.
Next time.
Next time, yes. And Phil, please.
Hi, my name is Phil Libin. It's very nice to be here. I'm a programmer by background. I'm a former venture capitalist, and this is my fifth startup. The startup that I'm probably best known for is Evernote, but I'm currently the founder and CEO of All Turtles, which is a product studio that focuses on making important products for the world. The major change that we're seeing in the world right now is the change that we're talking about, the change of people being able to change where they live and where they work and how they live and work. And so my current company is called and it's about giving people communication superpowers to let people live wherever they want and work in ways that are best for them. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. And I liked how your background slide changes as you speak. I think it's a product feature of right? Yes. Nice.
It is, yeah.
Nice. So with that, let's move on to Hiroki.
I'm Hiroki, co-founder and CEO at Oishi. So we are a strawberry vertical farm startup operating in New York at the moment. Vertical farming, for those of you who are not familiar with this technology, basically, you can see behind me, this is what we do. We grow crops in a sunless environment using LEDs and using air conditioners to control the environment. So with this technology, essentially, you can grow anything around the world any time of the year without being impacted by the outdoor weather conditions. And within this industry, we're the only company that can grow crops beyond leafy greens. So strawberries, tomatoes, melons. We're known for developing the bee pollination technology in an indoor vertical farm. So that's who we are. It's great to meet everyone today.
Thanks, Hiroki. Where can we get your strawberries?
So right now we're in most Whole Foods in Manhattan and a few select Whole Foods in New Jersey area, but unfortunately we're sold out from our current facility. So we can't go beyond that for a little while, but we're trying our best to expand as quickly as possible.
Nice. Looking forward to taste one. So
thank you.
Sure. So let's start by asking each panelist how has the COVID-19 affected their business and the way they manage and grow their business. Maybe I'll ask with Rie first.
Sure. So we're in the field of event marketing. So COVID-19 probably hit us quite a lot. So our service came out back in 2019. We released the service in July 2019, which is basically half a year before COVID hit. And we were initially doing event marketing in-person events and seminars. And after releasing the product and running it for half a year, we were basically severely impacted by the spread of COVID-19. I mean, people were not allowed to gather, in the same area, which is pretty critical for events. So what we did was back in February 2020, we decided to pivot entirely from an in-person event marketing platform to something that caters towards online and hybrid events. And I think back in Feb 2020, we were probably the first one to do so, at least in Japan. And for the longest time, we were the only provider of online event platforms in the region. So for us, that pivot and that decision in hindsight was a great one. And that kind of helped us, spread the product and gather attraction within the country. But after that, in 2022, maybe it's a little bit different in terms of timeline between the States and Japan. But in 2022, I think Japan slowly is starting to get back to the post-COVID era, back to normal. Maybe it's a little bit later than what the US has been going through. But this year is the year of, hybrid experiences, people gathering both online and in person. So we're trying to change the product to better cater towards that new landscape. So I would say that, I've gone through ups and downs and just, facing a lot of changes in the market. But it's been a great ride, and I'm learning quite a lot about how to manage the business and lead the team in a different way too. One of the big lessons is that you can't predict the future 100%. You need to plan ahead and make plans, but you need to be ready to kind of throw it out in the trash bin overnight if you need to, which is basically what we had to do in February 2020.
I want to focus on the pivot that you went through. It's amazing that from having like almost like an existential threat because you were doing offline conferences before, to turning it into like a big opportunity. How did you go through that pivot, and what was the process like?
It was literally like, I think it was at the very beginning of February, which was the onset of the outbreak, I think. We just went to the engineers and I went to a pub and we were drinking beer, and we were just like, what are we gonna do? Because we got calls coming in from customers saying they want to cancel things, they can't pay for the service anymore, and the number of contracts literally went down to like 0 overnight, right? So we were just like, what can we do? And I think it helped that it was so bad that it couldn't get any worse from here. I think it was just that because everyone was canceling it, and because we just knew that it wasn't going to get any better if we were to just wait and twirl our fingers and just wait for the situation to change. So I think we were just had a good couple of beers, and I think that helped. We were just like, why not just pivot entirely and just try to go with it for half a year and we'll see what happens. And we said that even if the effect of COVID were to only last for 3 months, we thought that that was enough time for people to actually embrace the online option, right? It wasn't, we thought that 3 months or half a year was enough time for people to change their behavior, that if we were to go, full on with this decision and pivot for half a year, then we were either way gonna be a leading product half year down the road. So I think it was a fairly easy decision after kind of going through that prediction and scenario making.
Okay, thank you. Phil, moving on to you, can you describe what was your journey in the past 2.5 years like in this COVID-19?
Well, we started after COVID-19 already happened. It was started directly in response to COVID-19. It was in May of 2020. So we all went to be fully distributed. We closed down our offices to work from home. And a couple of months later, we were pretty productive. There was a lot of work, but we just noticed that everything was kind of boring. People were tired. Video meetings were boring, were tiresome. Everyone was kind of sad. And so we just started, we started this as a joke. We basically made some software to fool around with, to make jokes on camera and have, weird backgrounds and effects and things like that. But we realized pretty quickly that this was actually this was an important thing that you could do. You could really improve communications on video. And so we realized that it really didn't have anything to do with COVID. COVID kind of made us think of it, but the idea would be around for much longer. So in many ways, COVID-19 for our business, we wouldn't be here without it. We got started directly as a result of it. But I think more broadly, if you look at not just our company, but kind of startups in general, entrepreneurships in general, this is a very, very interesting time. COVID and all of the other problems that have happened since and that are happening now are creating a really fascinating environment for entrepreneurship. There's a French philosopher named Michel Foucault, who part of his theory is he writes about something that he calls a historical discontinuity. So the idea is that history goes through periods of continuity and discontinuity, which means that for important things in a society, decades go by, sometimes hundreds of years, and the way that people think about important things doesn't change. And then all of a sudden there's a discontinuity, and the way people think about important things changes overnight. And whenever that happens, whenever you live through a historical discontinuity, it makes everything much more likely to change and much more likely to change quickly. And that creates the conditions where startups and entrepreneurs can succeed. And can succeed in many more interesting places than they could normally. And I think I've lived through, I'm 50 years old now. I've lived through a couple of historical discontinuities in my life, but this is the biggest one. So I think like what we are living through right now is this is the changiest the world has ever been, and so it's a very good time for entrepreneurship.
Thanks. So you started after the COVID-19. You saw the opportunity arose from this historical discontinuity. Could you talk a little bit about the way you manage your business? I think I read somewhere that you used to be very, very against video conferencing. You're very, very pro offline. How do you manage your business right now, and how do you manage your team?
Yeah, the biggest kind of philosophical idea is what we call the OOLOOP, out of office. We kind of call this movement the out of office world, and so the OOLOOP, OOO for out of office, is basically that when you improve the quality of life for creative people, for people who work with their brains and with their hearts, when you let them improve the quality of their life, it leads to an improvement of their productivity and improvement of their quality of work. And then when you improve their quality of work, that leads to more success and more satisfaction and more money, which you can then invest into improving the quality of life. And so you get this virtuous cycle where improved quality of life improves quality of work, improves quality of life, improves quality of work, and so on. And so for creative people, for people who work on laptops, if you let them, if you don't make them sit in traffic for 3 hours every day, and you make sure they have time to spend with their family and have time for their health and live in a nice place and not have to be in an overcrowded city, you get better work, and then better work leads to better life. So this is the philosophical framework, is we want to get this flywheel, this improving quality of life, improving quality of work. We want to get this spinning for as many people as possible. And we have many techniques for how we run our own companies doing this. We're all fully distributed. We still have a lot to learn, but we figured out lots of things, and happy to talk about specifics. But the most important thing is this philosophy of improving quality of life improves quality of work, and to keep that going for as many people as possible in the world.
Okay, thanks, Phil. Maybe in the later section, I'll ask more question about this fully distributed work and style. Hiroki, how was your journey for the past 2.5 years?
Sure. So, unlike the other two startups, we have a physical product and that we had to grow. So our pivot was a little bit of a different, I would say it happened in a different way. But so right before COVID hit, we'd just figured out how to grow strawberries in a vertical farm in New York after a couple of years of R&D. And we were selling our berries to Michelin-starred restaurants exclusively in Manhattan. And this was to really build a strong brand and build awareness among the foodies. But then when COVID hit, or right around when COVID hit, we were actually trying to transition from going from Michelin-starred restaurants in Manhattan, because we've already at that point, I think, had probably over 20% of all of the restaurants, Michelin-starred restaurants in Manhattan, serving our berries. So we thought it was time to move on to the next stage, which was D2C model. So opening up our channel to the general public. But then COVID hit, so this was almost like a forcing mechanism that really accelerated us to, go from restaurants straight to all DTC because all the restaurants were closed in Manhattan. And so that kind of helped the transition in a way. And at the same time, on the consumer side, because people who used to dine out, outside all the time, now they no longer have that option, and they had to buy their own food. They had to make their own food, and so people's awareness towards different types or different options of food and produce, and their awareness towards vertical farming industry in general started to really rise. And so it wasn't just us, but I think all of the vertical farming companies that benefited from this general awareness and attention to food in general. And so I think that was a big change that we saw in the society as well. And then on top of that, there was definitely this I think attention towards food security on the more public side of things. And because governments started thinking, how do we grow food domestically because of this discontinuity in the supply chain that we used to have. And so a lot of I think VC investment, lots of government money started flooding into this space. So I think overall, as an industry, there were probably more positives than negatives for us in general.
Okay, thanks. With that, I move on to the next part, which is the outlook for the future. So I think all panelists mentioned that they basically turned this COVID-19 into an opportunity for grow their business. And I would like to ask what's ahead. So this grand theme of this conference is Roaring 20s and crafting a grand design for entrepreneurship going forward. What's your view about the next decade or so in terms of entrepreneurship? It's a very general question, but you can take in any angle that you would like. Yeah, maybe I'll start with you.
For entrepreneurship in general?
Yeah.
For the next decade?
For the next decade or so.
Okay. Yeah, that's a very tough question. I'll speak since the two other panelists are dialing in from the States. I'll speak about the Japanese market maybe, but I think the field of entrepreneurship is facing a pretty bright future, I would say, especially in the Japan market. So a little background, before I live in Tokyo now, but I used to live in San Francisco right before this. So I did see the entrepreneurship startup landscape in San Francisco and then moved here. And from that perspective, especially when I first moved to Tokyo, I was pretty surprised with the lack of entrepreneurship and the lack of startups, venture capital money in the ecosystem. But I think it's definitely progressed a lot in the last 5 years. You probably have felt it firsthand as well. But, I think I would like to say that I think COVID-19 has accelerated what we call in Japanese DX, which is digital transformation. When I moved to Japan, I was very surprised to find that this was a very paper-dominant culture, still using facsimile, maybe we still do, but I think there's a lot of hurdles and there's a lot of improvements that we need to make in terms of adoption of technology and making the entrepreneurship landscape flourish a little bit more. But I do think that we've made a lot of progress in the last 5 years, and I do think that, maybe compared to the States, it's still far behind, but what I'm seeing right now amongst my friends and peers, people are a lot more open to taking that jump and starting new businesses. And I think venture capital money is starting to increase a lot over the years. So I do think that the next 5 to 10 years is pretty optimistic.
Thanks. Let me ask a follow-up question. So you mentioned the Japanese entrepreneurship was growing even before COVID-19, and COVID-19 basically accelerated. What do you believe was the driving force? Is the driving force behind this growth of the entrepreneurship in Japan? Japan is not very known for entrepreneurial activities in the past.
I think it's because maybe I'm a little bit biased because I'm in the B2B field, and a lot of my peers are starting companies in the B2B field as well. But I think that one of the main factors was the fact that if you're running a B2B business, how corporations behave and how they adopt technology is a huge factor, right, in your business. And I think compared to 2 years ago or 2.5 years ago, I think Japanese corporations are a lot more willing to use technology and use cloud services compared to 2.5 years ago. And I think that was partly because of COVID and partly because of the acceleration of remote work. Especially within the B2B field, I think how corporations are changing in their behavior and tech adoption has definitely kind of accelerated, accelerated entrepreneurship and people thinking maybe I can create something new and there will be people that are going to use the product, is my take.
Okay, thank you. And I'll ask either Phil or Hiroki, whoever wants to take this question. So what's the view in the US towards entrepreneurship post-COVID-19?
Please.
Oh, okay. Well, so I'm not sure if I can speak of all American entrepreneurs, but when you look at the global level, and this may not be specifically tied to pre-COVID, post-COVID discussion, but when you think about the past 100 years, I feel like everything started with industrialization, and then towards the end of the 20th century, we started seeing IT revolution. But all of these, in my view, I think it was really a pursuit of and a maximization of efficiency, right? But I feel like especially because I'm in the food and the agriculture space, the whole world is shifting from that efficiency to survival as a human race. Right. And so this is, and when I say this, I'm talking about sustainability pressure for the human race. And so there's going to be a big paradigm shift in big industries where, in the traditional momentum, we might not have seen much innovation. And this is because, the government and the public sector is setting certain goals, and this is driving a lot of the private sector movement as well. And so, obviously the big movement has been in the electric vehicle industry. I don't think in 2010, most people, had confidence that electric vehicles was going to become the mainstream so quickly, but it happened, because of this pressing need, right? And so I think these kind of pressure is going to happen in a lot of the big industries that's supporting the basic activities of human beings. And so this is industries like energy, manufacturing, farming, and so to answer to your question, I think the tech boom will continue, but I think with a bit of a different driving mechanism, so shifting from just efficiency to sustainability and survival.
Okay, thank you. So in terms of the tech boom that we have maybe for the last 10 years or so, I feel like maybe from the start of this year, 2022, tech stocks have been hit quite hard in the public market and maybe somewhere around like middle to later stages. And that is impacting the private funding as well. And I hear US companies, US VCs are investing less in startups. Do you feel that heat in the market? And also, do you think that disruption will stifle entrepreneurship growth or tech innovation in the US going forward?
Yes, so I definitely feel it. We've been talking with a lot of investors, some investors just suddenly, disappear from the conversation. And, some investors tell us that there has been, a wide policy or a change in policy that, they can no longer invest in, XYZ type of startups anymore. And so I definitely feel that, much more strongly here in the United States compared to talking to Japanese investors. But I think, just speaking on behalf of Japanese entrepreneurs, this could be a very big chance. And also for the, the Japanese government, I know this year has been a significant, I would say, a year where the Prime Minister, Kishida-san, has really emphasized the importance of startup investment. So while the rest of the world is out on the watch, I think Japan could take advantage of this situation, and especially a lot of large Japanese companies are sitting on piles of cash, even amidst this type of crisis. So this could be a time to take advantage of that, and Japanese entrepreneurs could take advantage of their geographical advantages and raise money from Japan. Now it might actually be better to do it so than ever.
Thanks. Phil, I want to go back to the question about the work style. You mentioned that you at are doing a fully distributed work. And I also hear news that some big tech companies in the US is asking their employees to come back maybe 3 days a week or so. What do you believe will be like the optimal like work style going forward now that people have experienced some remote work during COVID-19? What do you think will be the next optimal work style?
Well, the way that we have figured out to run things ourselves, which works great for us, and as we see more and more companies adopt something like this, it becomes, I think, very powerful. Is this idea? Well, we call it a communication hierarchy. Basically, it kind of looks like this. There's 3 levels of communication, and the important thing is to do the type of communication that's best at each level. So think of it as a pyramid, and all the way at the top up here is in person. This is like when you're like physically in person, like you guys are over there in the same room with other people. And whenever you're actually here, it's at the top of the pyramid because this is very expensive. This is hard to scale. You have to travel. It's hard to reproduce. So whenever you're actually physically in person, it's very special. It's very precious. You don't want to waste this. You don't want to waste in-person time. Whenever you're physically in the same room with someone, you shouldn't be sitting in a boring room showing slides to each other. You should be having a good experience. You should be at dinner. You should be bonding as human beings. You should be doing things that you can only do in person. And it is very important to do certain things in person, but only certain things, not others. Then sometimes you're down here, you're in the middle. And this is what we're doing right now. This is live video. And this portion is also very good for certain things. It's very good for question and answers, for talking, for pointing at things, for demonstrating things, kind of like what we're doing now. And when you have that kind of communication, you should do it on live video. But then there's other things that are actually much better down here, recorded video. And recorded video is best for anytime you have to explain something. Anytime that I have to convey any kind of complicated information, it's always better to do it asynchronously, because then I can make sure I get it right. I can do it. I can record a video like this with slides. And I can make sure that it's good, and it conveys the point. And it takes me just as much time to record something as to do it live, but I know it's going to be good. But more importantly, it's better for the audience. It's better for all of you because you don't have to watch it at the same time as I'm talking. You can watch it when you have time to pay attention, and you can watch it at a different speed, and you don't have to worry about missing something or taking notes. You can rewind it. You can watch it as many times as you want. So the idea is you want to move as much as possible between these 3 settings. Sometimes you want to be down here. Sometimes you want to be live. Sometimes you want to move in person. And I think like moving smoothly between these categories, between these areas, like this is what the future of management and distributed companies is going to be like. So different companies are going to have this in different proportions. For us personally, for me, we've done a lot of studies on this. It's about 5 to 10% up here in person. So I have people, visit us, we get together, but when we do get together, we don't show papers to each other or slides. We bond. That's maybe 5% of the time. Another about 15% to 20% of the time is in the middle, is live video. That's when we're talking. And probably 75 to 80% of the time is asynchronous. It's recorded video, it's Slack, it's email, and that combination works great. And if we tried to do everything in any one of these categories, then it would be much, much worse than before. But I think different companies have to experiment to find the right ratio that works for them.
Thanks, Phil. And I want to mention that, as you changed your slides, people were really smiling here in the conference room. Yes.
Well, and this is an important thing. I think to realize is that video and in person, they're not enemies. They're not replacements of each other, right? They're co-equal partners. Like, it's not true that everything is better in person. What I just did, like all of this stuff that I'm doing, you know, showing slides and being here and then jumping around, like, this is better on video. I couldn't have done this in person. If I was sitting in that chair next to you trying to explain this, it wouldn't be as clear. But I wouldn't do it. I would do something else. So you should take advantage of each type of communication. You shouldn't think, well, in person is better, but I can't do it, so it's going to be on video. You should do what's best in each segment. There's no compromises approach. I think when you do that, that's when you unlock the real communication superpowers.
Perfect. And Ria, you're also running like a software startup in a similar space with probably doing more hybrid conferencing software. What do you think will be the work style going forward in the future?
Yeah, that's a very big question. I can speak about what we do and what I think. I unfortunately don't really know if it's the norm here, at least in the Japanese context. But you know, after COVID, we actually did shift to what Phil would say fully distributed. We do still have an office here in Tokyo. I guess compared to the States, I would say it's easier to gather in person, right? Because I think a lot of your employees are generally around Tokyo, and a lot of our customers are also around Tokyo too. But so we do have an office physically, but we are fully distributed or fully remote. And at first, I was a little bit hesitant. I thought it was going to create management issues or communication issues, and I was a little bit wary at the very beginning. But it really does open a lot of doors, and it gives you a lot of options when it comes to hiring or creating a team. We were test marketing in Australia earlier this year, and in order for us to do that, we needed to hire English speakers. And it's very difficult to hire English speakers in Japan, especially when you're asking them to come into the office every day. But because we were fully distributed, we were able to hire from outside of the country. And now there's tools and things in place that enables you to hire from abroad without physically establishing an office abroad. So we took full advantage of that, and we were able to hire people from outside of Japan and do our test marketing in Australia. And I do think that this is something that will accelerate in the future. I personally believe that in the next decade or two, a lot of Japanese companies and startups are probably going to need to look outside of Japan in order for them to expand their market. And I think it's very difficult to expand your market if you're if you need to be physically present in Tokyo and expect everyone to come into the office every day. So I'm hoping that this will change in the next 5 to 10 years. I think it's probably more so the case maybe in the States with a much and the country's a lot bigger than Japan physically, geographically. But yeah, I think it hasn't really taken place that much yet, but I think it will in the next 5 to 10.
Okay, so all of you, I think. So this new opportunity arose from this COVID-19 and basically took advantage of it. But what's important is, whether the change that you face, whether it's a long-term or short-term, it's very hard to determine beforehand. How do you know which one is like a long-term trend that you should base your business on? And how do you know which one is a short one that you should just ignore and continue? Does anyone have any answer to that?
I mean, I think I don't try to chase opportunities. I think there's kind of two major ways to think about companies and startups. There's chasing opportunities, and then there's solving problems. And those I think are not the same thing. And they're both valid, but it takes different mentality and different skill set. And our skill set is very much solving problems. So I don't care about new opportunities. I care about problems and important problems. And the thing about important problems is they're generally the same important problems that have been with us for a very long time, for tens of years, hundreds of years, thousands of years. Like, the big problems are the big problems. If you're not sure if something's a real problem, then it's definitely not a real problem. Like, all the real problems we know about and we're sure about them. So the way that I look at things is I try to say, well, what real problem can we solve this year in a way that would have been impossible 3 years ago. Because if the problem existed 3 years ago, otherwise it was probably not a real problem if it didn't exist. Maybe it got worse in the past 3 years, but it existed. But why was it impossible to solve 3 years ago, and now it's possible to solve it? What changed? And usually that change is some kind of a technological change or some kind of a societal change or both. But I look for things that what changed in the past couple of years that make a real problem go from being impossible to solve to being possible right now for the first time ever. And then that's what we work on. And with that kind of approach, we don't have to think about, well, is this a long-term trend or a short-term trend? Because the real problems have been with us for our whole lives, and we can just find ways to make them better with new technology and with new societal changes. If I was the kind of person that tried to chase opportunity, that would be very different. Then I would have to think about, really, is it a real opportunity? Is it going to go away? But I'm not interested in opportunity. I'm interested in problems.
Others?
Yeah, so I 100% double down on what Phil has mentioned, and for us, we're solving the food problem, and this is something that's irrelevant of whether COVID existed or happened or not, and for me it's the short-term impact versus long-term impact is not as relevant, but when events like this happens, you have to, as a management, you have to think about what could this what is the implication on my business, whether if it's the customer behavior or whether if it's the investor behavior, and how is that going to impact my business or runway. And so that I try to understand the news, what's happening in the market, and try to make sure that we don't fail in the short term because of these short-term trends that happens along the way. But the long-term mission and the goal is always the same. And it's really just managing your day-to-days where your short-term things that happen outside really impact your business.
And before maybe opening up for questions, I'll ask the last one, which is that startups and entrepreneurship are often termed as like the engine for innovation. It's very encouraged throughout the world. And my question to the panelists is, how, as a society, how can we further accelerate this entrepreneurial activity? In other words, how can we make your lives as entrepreneurs better? Yeah, you mentioned that Japan is having like a growth in the startup ecosystem. How can we further accelerate that? What do you believe is the roadblock?
That's a very tough question. The more you drill down on that, the more I think that we need to change the education system. Because, there are practical solutions, like increase VC money. I think, like the percentage of GDP that we allocate to venture within the venture capital world, in Japan is far less compared to that of the States. So one practical way of thinking about it is we need more money in the field. But then at the same time, there aren't many entrepreneurs in Japan. I feel like you need both sides of the equation. And the more I think about it, maybe it's because I've lived here, but I also grew up in the States, and I've received education in both countries. And the more I think about it, the more I think it is education. It's the way people think. It's the appetite for taking a leap of faith and embracing failures and being very supportive emotionally when people are taking on new challenges and doing something that no one has ever done before. I feel like it's very difficult to explain, but there's something about the education system that kind of spoon feeds information and does not necessarily lead to critical thinking or taking, or encouraging behavior that leads to entrepreneurship. I think it's a lot of people like to do what other people like to do. I don't want to generalize, but I do think that it's definitely true here. So my one answer would be to change education, although that's a very long-term task. Yeah,
it's a very long-term, and it's something that we do here at Globis too, changing education. Phil and Hiroki, the US is very, very vibrant in startup activity. So maybe this question is not very applicable in the US. But do you have any comments on how to accelerate further?
Can I go first and talk a little bit about Japanese entrepreneurs, and
Sure,
then
sure.
I'll let Phil wrap everything up. Speaking as a Japanese running a company in the US, I feel like the representation of Japanese entrepreneurs is far less than what it should be, especially considering the population of our country. And I think the fundamental cause of this is partly to reset its education, but at the same time, I think it's because we have a market in Japan that is big enough to pay back for the VC investments. And so all Japanese entrepreneurs, most Japanese entrepreneurs, they start the business in Japan, catering the business to the Japanese market. And even if it was an amazing technology, by the time they realize, oh, we want to go global, it's kind of too late at that point, because it's been, it's already like 5 years, 10 years at that point. And so what I really recommend people to do, and I've already seen met 3 or 4 Japanese entrepreneurs this year who I told them the exact same thing, is there are certain technologies that you can go straight to the United States or to Europe to start your business, and you have a much better market out there, and even a good chance of succeeding. And I know there's a big language barrier, but sometimes the Japanese market is not the best place to start, right? And but people just start there anyways. And so that's just something that I'd really recommend entrepreneurs to take a step back and really think, do I actually have a better chance starting it outside of Japan? And then also the investors to really, advise on their investments to go abroad earlier if there actually is a better market and a better product market fit out there.
Thanks. Phil, do you have any comments before opening up for questions?
Look, I think the essence of entrepreneurship is change, right? Like entrepreneurship is change trying to make something better. And when things are really good, when everything is great in the world, is there a lot of change? No, things are pretty good. Why? Who wants to change? And when things are bad, when things are difficult, that's when you get the conditions for change. So all of the problems in the world right now are what's making the change possible. So like, if you want to make life better for entrepreneurs, all you have to do is just be more optimistic. That's the key of it. And but not any kind of optimistic. I think I like to think of it as rigorous optimism. I think entrepreneurship is rigorous optimism. It's this idea that the world can be made better, and the world will be made better, but I have to do it. It's rigorous. I have to make a plan. I have to do it. It's not, I don't get to sit and watch. We all have to do it. We have to be rigorously optimistic together. And the best time to do that is when there's a lot of problems in the world, because those are the conditions for rigorous optimism to exist. And you asked earlier about how we think that entrepreneurship is going to be in the next 10 years. And I think it's kind of a funny question, because you're asking entrepreneurs. It's not like it's not the same as asking a weather reporter, a weatherman, what he thinks the weather is going to be like. They could say, well, I think it's going to snow, but he doesn't make it snow. You're asking an entrepreneur what entrepreneurship is going to be like. Well, we're making it. It's going to be great because we're going to do it. We're not passive bystanders that have to predict how things are going to happen. We have to make it happen. And I think now is the best time ever to do that. And I wouldn't even say that the US has this figured out any better than Japan. In fact, I think if I haven't spent so much time in Japan, I wouldn't have thought of any of these ideas. Japan has been a fundamental inspiration for me and for entrepreneurship. In fact, the greatest thing I own, period, and ever is this. I have this cup. I have this Star Wars mug that cost me $9 on Amazon. It was just a boring mug, and I had it when I was CEO of Evernote. I carried this mug around every day, and then I fell and it broke. It broke into many pieces, and it was very sad. And a friend of mine in Japan helped me to take it to a kintsugi master who repaired it, who glued it together with this traditional kintsugi style, and it's sitting on my shelf right now. And this is the most beautiful thing I own. And I learned about this Japanese philosophy and art of kintsugi, right? Which is when you're repairing something, and this idea that the damage and the breaking and the repair makes the item more valuable, that you don't try to hide the repair. You don't try to hide the cracks. You highlight them, you outline them in gold, because because the fact that something is damaged and something is broken and then you repaired it makes it better, makes it more beautiful, makes it more valuable. This to me is the ultimate entrepreneurial philosophy. It's the ultimate anti-fragile philosophy. It embraces damage and breaking, and then it says if you work to repair it and you're a master at repairing it, you can make something much more beautiful. I think it's great. I think it's a very Japanese philosophy, a very Japanese way of looking at entrepreneurship, and it's been a giant inspiration to me. And I think more entrepreneurs all over the world should try to understand a little bit more of the Japanese contribution to this kind of thinking.
I like that cup very much. And with that strong and optimistic message, I would like to open up the floor to the questions. If you have any questions, please raise your hand and somebody will be with you for the microphone. I'll probably take 2 or 3 questions at once. So before asking questions, please say who that question is addressed to.
Thank you very much. I have a question to the Phil. My name is Hiroyoshi Kakune from Sumitomo Pharma. So Phil-san had some study of business about all turtles connected to the globally to support for the startup, including Japan. So my question is, what did you manage and overcome such a global support to the startup? Because startups need to some issue, not allowed to solve some just a video or some seminar or something. If we have some experience, I want to hear about that.
So your question is how the all turtles are supporting startups go beyond Japan, go beyond borders, global. Okay, that's a question to Phil, and maybe I'll take 2 more questions.
Okay, so this is a question for Rie. I think it's a continuation from the education change need. So I wanted to ask you, I work in an academic environment. I wanted to ask you how Event Hub is actually aiming to contribute to this change. For instance, we had a shock to change from on-site to online classes in universities for students, but there was no support. And I think each class should be an event, and maybe that's a big market for the Event Hub and even also for online video lectures. So that's a follow-up.
So that's a question for Rie, and 1 more question.
Thank you, panelists. I think it was very insightful discussion. I have 2 questions, if I can. First question to Phil. Like a couple of months back, my colleague joined your company and asked me which company is joining. He said, I thought he's just avoiding that question, but then I updated his LinkedIn profile. I realized that's a company. You got very interesting product. I just want to know, how did you come up with such an interesting name? And another question is to all panelists, like to the new entrepreneur, like everybody are biased with their ideas. How did you validate your ideas, I think, and make a successful company? What steps you took to validate your idea and avoid the biases?
Okay, so the name, that's to you, Phil, and maybe how did you come up with your idea? Maybe Hiroki.
Sorry, I forgot to mention my name. I'm Suhas Barmase. I'm 2020 batch global student. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the last question, if Hiroki can answer, that would be great. So let's start with Phil. I think you had 2 questions to you.
So we picked the name because we wanted it to be about communication, and we wanted the product to let people be great communicators. And when you're a good communicator, other people agree with you. You know, when you talk and they're agreeing with you, they go, you can tell they're agreeing with you. So is the global international sign of agreement, which is why we picked it like that. In terms of how we support startups, our mission at All Turtles is not it's not really to support startups. It's to support entrepreneurs and more importantly, ideas. It's about making sure that if you have a good idea to solve a problem in a way that couldn't have been solved 3 years ago, you don't have to be forced to make a company first and raise money and hire people. Like you don't have to create a small company before you can really test your idea. So if you have an idea to solve an important problem in a new way, regardless of where you are in the world, we have people in many countries. We want to talk to you, and if we can help, we want to help make this idea real. And we help in whatever way we can. Sometimes it's with design, sometimes it's with help with fundraising, sometimes it's legal. It's kind of whatever it takes. But we're not a program. It's not something that you apply to. We don't have like classes. We don't have, thousands of applications. We work with people that we like, a small number of projects that we think make the world better. And if you're interested, please get in touch. We have a great team in Japan that you can talk to, and we can see if it makes sense to work together.
Great. So Rie, do you want to answer your question?
Yes. Yeah. So education. So I was actually previously a consultant in higher education back in California, and I was also involved with launching Teach for America here in Japan. So I've actually been in the education space before being an entrepreneur, and it's definitely one of the fields that I'm very passionate about. Unfortunately, with Event Hub currently, we're doing one segment, one field at a time, and right now we're focused on the marketing and sales segment. But after that, one of the fields that I do want to get into is education. We've actually gotten a lot of inquiries from universities and schools that are facing problems when, shifting from the all in-person experience to online or hybrid. And you're definitely right when you said that, classrooms and classes are events, right? I mean, it is where people gather and exchange information and create something new and collaborate. So I do think that there's definitely a huge potential there. We've unfortunately not really, started at it, but it's definitely something that we want to look into in the next 2-3 years. And I do want to exchange information with a lot of folks in the industry to think about how we can contribute to the field. So thanks.
And Hiroki, do you want to answer? How did you come up with the idea?
Yeah, sure. So this might not be an answer that you're looking for, but so originally I started my career in the consulting industry back in Japan, and that's when I first came across the vertical farming industry almost 10, 15 years ago, as this technology was actually invented in Japan before anywhere else in the world. And so I just had that lucky privilege to come across this technology before most other people outside of Japan, and then had the opportunity to go do my MBA at UC Berkeley in about 2015, and that was right around when this pressure for sustainability around agriculture started to really become a big problem, and we started seeing a lot of vertical farms, like Plenty, Bowery farms, pop up here and there. And I just happened to be in the heart of Silicon Valley, and I was still 28, 29 years old. And when you think about these chances don't come around in your life that many times, right? You're one of the most knowledgeable person at you're 28, 29 in an emerging market that could become $1 trillion industry in the next 30, 40 years. So for me, it wasn't really about, okay, where's the opportunity and like how do I become an entrepreneur? I wasn't even thinking of becoming an entrepreneur when I first went to Berkeley to do my MBA, but everything just was pointing in the right direction. And for me, it was almost I almost feel like I didn't have a choice but to start this business, right? I thought I was the best person to start this business in this intersection at this time of at this era. So that's kind of how I got into this. I think if it was more of like an opportunistic startup that I started on my own, I feel like I wouldn't have overcome all of the hardships that I'd experienced in this current startup and all the experiences that I've had in the past 5 years. So, having this, I would say, determination and this almost like a destiny type of feeling is something that really helped me, hang on to this company and push things really forward in the past 5 years.
Okay, thanks. So maybe we have time for another round of questions. If you have any questions, please raise your hand. Do we have any questions from online? No. Okay. So 1, 2, and maybe 3.
Hello, my name is Ariel Buzetto. I am a reporter with the English side of Sankei Shimbun. I have a question for all panelists or whoever wants to answer this first. But you've talked about, you'll have your respective experiences with sort of like ideas coming out of Japan or, working between Japan and the US, for example, amongst other places. What do you think is like the next maybe big idea that could come out of Japan, or are there any particular startups or enterprises that you've seen in Japan that you think could have a potential for having success abroad? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And the next question.
Thank you. I mean, what I feel like, apart from problem solving at the core of your business, you have your own unique technology, which is the differentiator in your business. How do you protect that? Because these are, over a period of time, it is easily replicable. How do you protect that?
Okay. How do you maintain the technological advance? Maybe I'll ask this one, Hiroki. And the last question to Miyasaka-san.
Hi, I'm Taka Miyasaka. I'm founder and CEO of a startup called Bonks, and I have a question for Phil. And I like your philosophy of quality of life, quality of work cycle, and elimination of commute obviously makes the quality of life better. Yes, that's one. And I just wanted to ask, like, what else are you doing to enhance your employees' quality of life?
Okay, thanks. So the first question, then the next idea from Japan, maybe Rie can answer. Hiroki, if you could answer the tech advantage, how to maintain that, and Phil, please take the last question. Let's start with Hiroki.
Sure. Well, sorry. Can you repeat the question again? Sorry.
How do you maintain the tech advantage?
Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
That's right. Yeah. For us, so I think the question was, how do you keep the advantage of the company even if technology becomes obsolete, right? And so to that extent, I think right now we're the only company that has a technology edge to grow something beyond leafy greens. But I'm fully aware that in 10 years, 20 years, our competitors will figure out how to grow strawberries. And that is the exact reason why we actually started with a product like strawberries, because for me, the most important thing, or what is the key to winning in the end, is building a brand and building something that people truly believe in. And I thought we could do that with our Japanese varietal strawberries. And by the time our competitors figure out how to grow strawberries, people would have already affiliated or associated our brand with the brand of excellence. And it's going to be extremely difficult for our competitors to come in to the same space with a product unless they have something that's half the price or 1/3 the price for the same product quality. And that was the strategic reason why we skipped the leafy greens and started with strawberries. So for me, the answer to your question is building a brand first before anyone else can come in using your technology moat in the start.
Thanks. Rie, maybe next idea from Japan in 30 seconds or so.
30 seconds,
Yes.
okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't really have a specific answer, but I would say that if you try to look at businesses as a way to, as Phil said, solve problems, I think one of the ways that I would think about it is what are the big, fundamental problems that a lot of other economies and countries are going to face that we are actually facing a lot earlier than everyone else. And I think one of them, for example, is like facing an aging population. I think Japan as an economy is probably going to be facing this problem earlier and at a massive scale before a lot of other countries. And I think so if you think about it that way, we are in a position to come up with innovative solutions or problem or ideas or businesses around this. And maybe this could be one of the fields that could be exported from Japan.
Thanks. And Phil, the last question, employee quality of life.
I really like Yamamoto-san's answer, by the way, just now. I think that's a really elegant way of looking at it. It isn't so much like what is going to be the next big idea from Japan. It's how can Japan help the rest of the world by what are the things that are going to happen here first. I think that's a very good lens. I think you did a much better job answering that question than I would have. In terms of quality of life, look, I think it all comes down to this. I think this is the big split that's happening in companies now. And I don't think it's remote or back in the office. And it's not like big companies or small companies. I think the really big split that's happening is high trust versus low trust environments. I think there are many, many, many companies who don't trust their employees. And because they don't trust them, they have to see them. They're like, well, if I can't see you, how do I know you're working? So they have to like force people back, or they have a lot of meetings, but the meetings are just to check up to check up on people because they don't trust them. Or even if the people are working remotely, they spy on them. They install, cameras and keyboard loggers. And there's other places that are trying to be high trust. And this, I think, is the central thing for knowledge workers, is I think people want to work in a high trust environment. They want to work where they are trusted. And that's what we try to do. So we trust all of our employees. We don't have a lot of rules. We don't check on people. We trust people by default. We trust everyone until you do something that breaks that trust, in which case we never have to work with you again. But by default, we trust everyone. We trust you to figure out how to do your job best. We can help you with that, but we're not going to tell you what to do. We don't tell you when to work, when not to work, where to work, how to work. We trust you to be productive, to say that you want to achieve, and we can give you some suggestions, we can give you some help, but fundamentally, we're trying to make a high trust environment. And all of our policies and techniques are set up for that. And it's very difficult. It's very difficult to run a high trust environment. And it's very difficult, especially as the company gets bigger. And we can do it for 10 people companies, and we can do it for 100 people companies. And I don't know, can you do it for 10,000 people companies? Or, where I live right now in Bentonville, Arkansas, it's the home of Walmart. I think Walmart has 3.5 million employees. Can you have a high trust company with 3.5 million people? But that's the real question. I think the best way to improve the lives of employees is to let them work in a high trust place so they can have a good life and a good work and human dignity.
Thanks, Phil. Unfortunately, we are up against the time. Let's thank all the panelists for talking about their deep experience and insightful comments. Thank you very much.